Good evening, my Sleba family. This is the second podcast, and today we want to look at what depression really is. And I have decided to come to you with some African perspective. But before that, I would like to just warn you that sometimes when we talk about mental health issues, it can be quite difficult and challenging for people, perhaps people who have experienced it or they've known somebody who has got mental health problems. So if you feel activated by this podcast, please look after yourself and make sure that you're able to find a comfortable place to sit before you either listen to this podcast. Thank you. So depression really is what I want to discuss this evening. And depression means a lot of things to a lot of people. And it can mean how people think, how they behave, and how they socialize. And so it's really around those kind of issues that I'm going to talk about today. So some may use the word depression to describe sadness, low mood, tired, fed up, the heart is compromised, or the whole body is consumed by something. I think most of you may have heard about the black dog analogy, or that's something I may bring up at a later time when we look at the forthcoming podcast. So some descriptions really from the African perspective tonight we start from the North African perspective. They describe depression as madness. Somebody's lazy or crazy. It's a mystery altogether, a state of sadness and despair. And when you move from there, you go to West African perspective on depression. You may come across words like broken heart, tormented, a breakdown in the whole system, and possessed by a demon, by a devil, and madness also, confused. You're lacking in focus. You don't have any focus. You are burdened by something, or you have a burdened heart. And also it may also be described as you have problem in the head, and also your heart is spoiled or broken, and if you translate it into the local dialects for example, in most West African countries, you may begin to see the correlation or the similarities in terms of what people say in all over sub-Saharan Africa, or even the whole of Africa. So if we move on towards the east of Africa, we begin to hear words like madness again, crazy, you're dull, you're sad, you're odd, different from the others, you're senseless, you're thinking too much or overthinking, or you have a tired head. That's really interesting. Tired mind. Your mind is tired, your head is tired, you have pain in the head, and sickness of the soul. These are really interesting perceptions, isn't it, in terms of how people just refer to depression in all of these areas that I'm trying to talk about. And if you eventually come to South Africa, depression is described as problems of the heart, and the sickness of the head, and craziness. Craziness seems to really permeate throughout the whole of the African continent, and madness also seems to be part of what most people will relate to in terms of depression. And some people might say you possess, and this is really quite typical in the South African part of Africa, or you are cursed, and also you are lost. So these are some of the perceptions really in terms of what depression means. So at this point, it will be really important for us to look at how we translate this into our own dialect, in your own tribe. So if you could reflect on that perhaps and see what you may come up with. The next time I bring up any podcast, it's going to be around how we translate this in the Western perspective. All of this African perspective will be translated into the Western perspective in terms of how do they describe depression. I think previously I've talked about mental health issues, depression as a whole, and also came up with some assessment tools or what people might use. But next podcast will be really understanding from the Western perspective to really find and locate and understand how do they view depression and whether there's any similarities to what we Africans normally we describe depression to be. I would like to thank you so much for this short podcast, and look after yourself. My third one will be out soon, but please, if there's any questions or any concern, please let me know, and I'm always available to support. Thank you.